Let's go ahead and do some yoga. So we'll start as always, just kind of tuning in and taking stock and seeing how our bodies are doing today. So find your nice, comfortable seated posture. Try and feel your way into having an aligned spine. Let your shoulders relax. Let your head balance on top of your spine. Take a deep breath in through your nose. And a big exhale through your mouth. And just kind of tune in for a moment, noticing all of your parts, every part of you. And then let's start breathing a little deeper and slower, maybe some Ujjayi breathing. And then let's go ahead and check in with thoughts, emotions, energy, and formulate your intention for your practice today. Whatever that might be, your intention is very personal to you, but it's helpful to be clear about it. So let's go ahead and bring palms together in front of the heart once you are clear about your intention. And then take a deeper breath in and a big exhale. Good. So we're going to go ahead and start standing at the front of the mat. So let's go ahead and come on up to standing. Your feet can be hip bone or sit bone distance apart, or they can be touching. Just depends on what feels best to you. And so just kind of taking a moment here to feel good alignment. You want to feel your feet root down, a little bit of weight more towards the heels, so the hips are shifting back slightly, the shoulders shift back, the ears shift back, and then we bring our palms together in front of our heart. We inhale, reach the arms up, and as you exhale, I want you to bend your knees and fold forward into your ragdoll. Totally relaxing your neck, just hanging, just dangling. And of course, you want to make sure your knees are bent. So after you've had a couple of breaths here, just kind of notice how you feel at the upper part of your hamstrings. So that's the upper part of the backs of your thighs, getting close to the sit bones. And without changing anything other than this intention, I want you to notice if there's a difference. Don't change anything, but just imagine that you're tipping your hip bones more onto your thighs or trying to poke your tailbone up towards the ceiling. You should notice more of a stretch. Let's go ahead and inhale and come all the way back up. Reach the arms up and overhead. And as you exhale, bring your palms together in front of your heart. So that tiny, tiny little movement, that tiny little adjustment had to do with tilting the pelvis. So today is all about your pelvis. And we are going to start using a block, or if you don't have a block, you can actually do this without, but it's helpful as a little cue. Your block, if you're using one, is at mid width, so not skinny, not crazy wide, middle width. And you're going to put it between your thighs. So I always make the really corny joke that you're going to be like a Pez dispenser. So for those of you who remember Pez candies, that's what we're doing. It's a really small movement, but I want you to get used to the movement of the pelvis, since that's what we're playing with today. So if your legs are totally straight and you make your block move forward, that's a backward tilt of the pelvis. You'll feel your buns tighten, the pubic bone pushes forward. And it's a backward tilt because if you think about your hip bones, they're moving back. So this part up by your hips, that moves back. This is a backward tilt of the pelvis. Now, if you do the opposite and you push the block behind you without bending your knees, you feel your hip bones move forward. That's a forward tilt of the pelvis. It's kind of like poking your tailbone back. So I want you to do this a few times. Hopefully you don't have
spectators to your yoga practice today. It's gonna look a little weird, but I'm gonna turn sideways. So the idea is keep your legs straight, block moves forward, block moves back, block moves forward, block moves back. This is just learning to tilt the pelvis. So pubic bone pushes forward, tailbone pushes back. Those are your two different actions. You can think of it from the top of the hips or from the tailbone and pubic bone, but the idea is you have your pelvis, it's kind of like a dish, and you tilt it back or tilt it forward. This is how we're gonna fine tune our practice today. So you can just kind of put your block nearby your mat. Hopefully you've got that little motion. That's what we're gonna be playing with. So let's bring feet together, palms together. Take a big inhale, reach the arms up. And as you exhale, go ahead and fold forward into your standing forward bend. Remember, it doesn't matter if you bend your knees or not, but here's the first place we're gonna play with our pelvic tilt. You're tilting your pelvis forward. So it's kind of like the hip bones are trying to move onto the thighs and your tailbone is trying to poke up towards the ceiling. You should automatically feel that as a much stronger stretch through your hamstrings. And then just kind of maintain that pelvic alignment as you look up and lengthen. And then back down. So we're going to step back with our right foot first. Just kind of hold your lunge for a moment. Just let your body adjust. We'll take everything easy today, but you'll still have pretty good effects. So once you've kind of adjusted to this lunge, see if maybe you can allow your hips to sink a tiny bit deeper. Play with straightening your back leg, your right leg, and it may not go all the way straight, and that's fine. Then that tiny imperceptible adjustment, we're going to try and tilt the pelvis back. That means from this position, pubic bone pushing forward, hip bones are moving back slightly. What that should do for you is give you a hint of a stretch on the front of your right hip. So let's work with that. Go ahead and drop your right knee down. Bring your hands to the top of your left thigh. Backward tilt of the pelvis. Pubic bone moves forward. Top of the pelvis moves back. Then we allow the whole hip girdle to move forward. Then go ahead and take your arms up in the air. What I want you to be mindful of is just really keeping your focus on that tilting backward of the pelvis. So what you should feel, muscles around your right bun, your right glute are tight. Front of the right hip is stretching. And you're just breathing. And then we're going to bring the hands down on either side of the left foot and fully extend the left leg. Now, this is one place that you might want to use blocks or a block if you need to. If your hamstrings are super tight, feel free to do that. Go ahead and do like we normally do. Get your left leg straight, flex the ankle and toes. You won't be able to see a difference, but you should be able to feel a big one. All I want you to do now is tip your pelvis forward. Imagine with your left leg still straight that your left hip bone is moving towards the front of the thigh and your tailbone is trying to poke up. You should feel quite a difference in the sensation in the back of your left thigh when you do that. Let's go ahead and take the left knee back to meet the right knee. Drop your buns to your heels, forehead down, child's pose. Now in child's pose, this is a rounded back posture. I want you to think of tilting your pelvis back. That means tuck your tailbone under a little bit. What you'll feel is a slightly enhanced stretch in the low back. Then we're going to scoot forward into Sphinx. Now we're going to tilt the pelvis back a little bit. So before you traction, just take a moment and tilt the pelvis back. In Sphinx, you've got kind of a good sensory marker here. It's kind of like you're pushing your pubic bone into the floor. You'll feel your buns tighten, right? And if you kind of push through the forearms and lift your chest, you'll feel a little stretch on the front of the hips. Now we're going to relax the glutes now though. So let go of any pelvic tilting and just pull with your forearms so that you can have some length in your spine. And then we move into downward facing dog. Any little movements you need to do here, go for it. And then once you find stillness, I want you to do the same thing here. Think of this as a forward tilt of the pelvis. So it's like your tailbone is trying to poke up towards the ceiling. And you're still pressing your heels down. Now, when you make that tiny adjustment with the forward tilt of the pelvis, you should feel the stretch in your hamstrings intensify. Let's take one more breath here. And then step the right foot forward. So just hold your lunge for a couple of breaths. We said we'd kind of give our bodies time to adjust. And then I want you to do the same thing that we did on the other side. Allow the hips to sink as much as you comfortably can. Begin to straighten the left leg. It may or may not go all the way straight, but that's kind of the intention. Then you play with the pelvic tilt. In this case, backward tilt of the pelvis. Pubic bone pushes forward. You can feel the muscles at the base of your left glute tightening. You should feel a little something on the front of your left hip. Drop your left knee down, hands to the top of the right thigh. Same thing, backward tilt of the pelvis. So pubic bone pushes forward, the hip bones move back, and you allow the hips to move forward while keeping the pelvis tilted back. That's what really allows you to open up the front of your left hip. Go ahead and raise the arms overhead and just keep your focus on tilting the pelvis backwards. Then we're going to bring both hands down either side of the right foot. They can definitely be on blocks. That might help today. Extend your right leg fully. Flex the ankle and toes. And then we play with the tilt of the pelvis. Now we're tilting it forward. So it's like you're trying to poke your tailbone behind you or even up towards the ceiling. And you should feel more stretch than you were before. And then from here, we're just going to step forward to a standing forward bend. Inhale, reach the arms all the way up and overhead. And as you exhale, bring your palms together in front of your heart. Inhale, reach up. Exhale, fold forward. Inhale and look up halfway. Exhale back down, this time stepping back with the left leg. Hold your lunge. Try and tilt the pelvis back for a moment. Then I want you to go ahead and drop your left knee down. Move your right foot forward quite a bit. I like to take mine far enough forward, in this case without moving my hands, that my right heel is close to my fingertips. So just, you don't have to go that far, but it's a good idea. Before you do anything, tuck the tailbone under. So you're tilting the pelvis back, let your hips sink forward. Now you're going to keep your left hand on the ground. Keep your pelvis strongly tilted back and rotate right arm behind you. You should already feel some interesting things happening. Purely optional, if you can, you bend the left knee. And you grab your left foot with your right hand and continue to allow the hips to move forward while tilting the pelvis back. This can be a pretty exciting stretch on the front of the left hip and thigh, so be mindful, don't overdo. And then release. Right hand is going to come back down. Now this is where your block might be useful if your hamstrings are super tight. We're going to do the same thing we did the first time through. We're just going to rock back until the right leg is straight. Flexing the ankle and toes, really trying to get the right leg straight. So if you do have tight hamstrings, being up on blocks might help. And then same thing here with a little bit of extra help from tilting the pelvis forward. like you're trying to poke your tailbone back or make your hip bones tilt forward onto your right thigh. That should make this a pretty exciting hamstring stretch. Take one more breath. And then we'll take the right leg back to me, so left leg. Now, go ahead and wag your tail. Those of you doing vinyasa practices, you're welcome to do vinyasa. When you do your cobra or upward facing dog, it's a backward tilt of the pelvis and downward facing dog forward tilt. So those of you that are hanging with me, we'll take a quick child's pose. Just breathe into your low back. And then we'll scoot forward into either Sphinx or Cobra. And then downward facing dog. Now remember, to get the full effect in your down dog, it's really important to push the hips back, to tilt the pelvis forward, and to press the heels down. Don't try and walk your feet forward. Don't try and lift your heels to make it easier. We want to feel it all. Take your left foot forward. Go ahead and drop down onto the right knee, and then you're going to scooch your left foot forward quite a bit if you can, all right? Farther than you think you should. Tilt your pelvis back. So that means pubic bone forward. You're going to feel the muscles at the base of your right glute tightening. Right hand stays on the ground. Rotate your left hand behind you. Again, this might be plenty today. If you're already feeling a lot in the front of your right hip, this is it. You don't have to do any more. If you want, you can bend your right knee and grab the right foot or ankle with your left hand. Keep your pelvis tilted and keep moving the right hip forward. The pelvic tilt is everything. One more breath here. And then we release the right foot down and just extend the hips back so the left leg becomes completely straight if possible. Flex the ankle and toes, and then you guessed it, tip your pelvis forward. So we're using these pelvic tilts to really intensify and experiment with the sensations. From here, go ahead and step forward to a standing forward bend. Inhale, arms come all the way up and overhead. Exhale, palms together in front of your heart. Inhale, reach up. Exhale, fold forward. Inhale and look up. And exhale back down. So we're going to step back with the right leg again. Now, everybody work at their own ability. If you need to modify, please, please feel perfectly okay dropping the right knee down and doing what we've already done. I'm pretty sure you'll still feel a lot. If you feel like you have the strength, we're going to come up into a high lunge. Tilt your pelvis back. It's harder to do in a high lunge. You're trying to get your hip bones to move back, and you want to start dropping your hips down towards the ground, tilting the pelvis back and breathing. In this position, you should feel a lot of stretch on the front of your right hip. Hands are going to come down on either side of the left foot. Blocks are okay. As much as you can, you straighten your left leg. Then tilt your pelvis forward. Wow, you should feel a big difference. So it's really just a very subtle fine-tuning of the position with a huge payoff. We're actually affecting connective tissue as much as muscles, so you're really getting a lot of extra bang for your buck with this one. From here, we'll go ahead and take the left leg back. Those of you doing vinyasas, off you go. The rest of us are going to take a child's pose. Scoot from child's pose into either Sphinx or Cobra. And then downward facing dog.
Remember, you're tilting the pelvis forward, pressing your heels down, pushing the hips back. Step forward with your right foot. Again, it's absolutely okay to drop your left knee down. If you can hold a high lunge, come on up. Pelvis is tilting back. That means the muscles at the base of your left glute are tightening, and then we start to drop the hips, trying to find the perfect amount of sensation on the front of the left hip. One more breath here. And then the hands come down on either side of the right foot. We straighten the right leg. Pelvis tilts forward. So it's like you're trying to put your right hip bone onto your right thigh, make your tailbone point up. Quite a difference just by tilting the pelvis. And then step forward to your standing forward bend. Inhale, reach the arms all the way up and overhead. Exhale, palms together in front of your heart. Inhale, reach up. Exhale, fold forward. Inhale and look up halfway. And exhale back down. So I want you to step back with your right leg. Go ahead and drop onto the right knee and scoot your left foot forward again. Now, if you've got a block, I would love for you to go ahead and have it nearby. And if you don't have a block, but you've got a piece of furniture, you can also use that. But here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna try and get our left foot pretty far forward. And that's different for everybody. Nothing too crazy, but your right knee should be back behind your right hip, because the first thing you're gonna do is tilt your pelvis back. It means you're kind of tucking your tailbone under, letting the hip bones move back. I want you to feel something on the front of the right hip, just a hint though, right? Because right now you're leaning forward. You're gonna use your block, I'm gonna put it over here where you can see, at whatever level you want it, even if that's the highest level, so that your body can be vertical over your hips instead of leaning forward. So you might need to hang onto a coffee table, that's fine. Your left foot should be flexed and your legs are very active. Now, if you feel like you're okay with it, you can let the legs slide and either support your weight with your block, or if you're feeling strong, let the arms come overhead. The pelvis stays tilted back. This might look like just a very baby modified stretch, and that's perfect. Doesn't matter what it looks like. All right, hands come down, left leg goes back. Child's pose if you're with me, vinyasas if you're hardcore. If you're in child's pose, take an extra breath. It's shortening what you were just lengthening. Scoot into Sphinx or Cobra. And then downward facing dog. Now you know you're tilting your pelvis forward in your down dog and pressing the heels down. Lots of stretch in the backs of the legs. Step your right foot forward. Go ahead and drop onto the left knee and take your right foot fairly far forward. Whatever's comfortable for you. Remember, it doesn't matter what this looks like. You just want to find the right place for you. Once you're here, the first thing you do is establish that backward or posterior tilt of the pelvis. You're tightening the muscles at the base of your left glute, trying to make the hip bones move back. And then you grab that block or whatever and try and get your torso vertical. So even if you're staying, like I'm at a backed up spot here, if you've got your pelvis tilted back and you're feeling this on the front of your left hip and the back of the right thigh, perfect. If you want to slide the right foot forward, go for it. If you feel like you can, you're welcome to take the arms up and overhead. And then we're going to take the right leg back to meet the left leg. Everybody go straight to downward facing dog, tipping your pelvis forward. And then walk your feet forward. Standing forward bend, pelvis is still tipping forward. And then inhale, reach the arms up and overhead. And exhale, bring your palms together in front of your heart. So see, I told you we'd be working with the pelvis because I knew if I told you we were going to do splits today, you guys would have all hung up and just left me alone. But you did it. Congratulations. Even if you're just working on the beginnings of it, this whole practice is so important because it's the front and back of the hips, and as modern humans, we're way too tight there. So this is a really good practice today for all of us, right? So now we go back to the front of the hips. We're going to work with dancer pose. If you are balance challenged today, hang on to something. It's really all about opening up the hip flexor. So the first thing we're going to do is stand on the left foot. You're going to reach back with your right hand, preferably palm up, but if you need to go the other way, that's cool today. Grab your right foot. Pelvis tilts back. We're really working on the hips, so just worry about your pelvis tilting back. Then pull the right leg behind you. Keep tilting the pelvis. Left arm comes up and overhead. Now, I don't care if you stay straight up and down today, just getting that stretch on the front of the hip. If you'd rather lean into it, that's fine, but don't lose that right front hip opening. Your pelvis needs to strongly tilt back the entire time. Come all the way back up, put your right foot down. We're gonna do the same thing on the other side. So reach back, grab your left foot with your left hand. Very strongly tilt the pelvis back. That means you feel your buns tightening, right? A little bit. Then you pull the left leg behind you until you feel the front of your left hip start to stretch. Right arm overhead. You may stay upright, just like this, or if you want to, lean into it, but keep your pelvis tilted back. And then come back up, both feet on the ground. All right, nice job. One more thing we're going to use the block for, maybe. Some of you with flexible hamstrings will not need the block. If you know that you have tighter hamstrings, for sure you're going to want one or two. Just depends on you. So we're going to stand on the right foot first. But here's what we're going to do. I want you to go ahead and bend your knees a tiny bit. Lean down and put your hands on the floor so that they're only barely in front of your feet. Not way out in front, like an inch or two in front of your feet. And then just slide your left toes back. The idea here, if your hamstrings are tight, because we're going to want this right leg to go straight, this is where you could use your block if you need to, either at like low level, mid level, even high level. I'm going to keep my hands on the ground, but you do what you need to do. Here's the first thing we're going to do. Left toes are still on the ground. We're going to tilt the pelvis forward. I'm trying to get my hip bone to touch the top of my right thigh. Then I'm going to lift my left leg up in the air as high as I can while continuing to try and tip my pelvis farther forward. Left leg comes back down. Just take a breath. Make sure your hands are in the right spot. Use a block if you need to. Just slide your right toes back. Tilt your pelvis before you lift off. You're trying to get your tailbone to point towards the ceiling. Left hip bone to the top of the left thigh. And then you're going to raise your right leg way, way, way up. Try and have your left leg straight. Your hands can be on a block if you need to. Right foot back down. Big inhale, arms all the way up and overhead. Exhale, palms together in front of your heart. Big inhale, reach up.
Exhale, fold all the way forward. Go ahead and look up halfway and lengthen. And then back down. My suggestion is that everybody take a child's pose and take a couple of breaths. Let your pelvis just relax right now. Your tailbone will automatically start to sink down towards the ground. So it's a backwards tilt of the pelvis, but you can do it without effort here. Breathe into your low back. And then we're going to scoot forward onto our stomachs. And we'll just do cobra and pay attention to the pelvic tilt. So the first thing I want you to do once you're on your stomach, this is different from Sphinx, is I want you to bring your feet together, including the heels. Now they may not come all the way together, but kind of squeeze your inner thighs together. You will feel your glutes tighten. That's okay, because we want that backward tilt of the pelvis. It's a good sensory marker here that the pubic bone pushes into the mat. Hands are either under the shoulders if you're tighter, or back by the rib cage if you have more flexibility. And then we're just going to peel the chest up off the mat, keeping the pelvis tilted back so that we feel it in the front of the hips. And then one last downward facing dog. Your fingers are spread. You are pushing your hips way back. Your heels are reaching strongly for the floor. Press those heels down, then tilt your pelvis forward. It's a small move with a big payoff. Take a couple of breaths. Then you can walk your feet forward. Have a seat in Dandasana. So when we come into Dandasana, usually I have you put your hands right behind you, right? So that you can have that straight spine. Just kind of notice today, if you can do it maybe without the hands on the ground. You've got a lot more length at your sit bones today. Now, if you're particularly tight in the hips, you might still be back here and need to press with the hands. But if you can stay on the sit bones and have a vertical spine and active legs, do that with your hands on your thighs today, and just take a couple of breaths here. Now, we're going to just come into a forward bend, but here's the deal. When you are seated on the ground, it's kind of hard for your pelvis to move unless you have a lot of flexibility. If you put your hands on your hips and you feel that you can tilt your pelvis forward, then you're good, like this. If you feel like you're back here and you can't tilt the pelvis, I would like for you to bend your knees until you feel like you can. You're just going to have to be honest and see if you're a bent-legged person or a straight-legged person for this forward bend. Tilt your pelvis forward. Imagine your tailbone is poking back behind you, and lean out over both of your legs. And then come on up from that. I'm going to turn around and face you. So, however that felt or looked for you, I want you to remember that, because it's about to get a little bit easier after our next move. Now, you are going to have to be incredibly mindful of yourself. So here's what I want you to do. Dandasana, right? Hands beside you, so you've got that straight spine. Start sliding the hands out to the side. I come to my fingertips because it keeps me from cheating. They are straight out from my hips. I am pushing into the floor for a straight spine. I'm not hunching and rounding, pushing into the floor. My legs are active. So here's the deal. You may not round your back. You may not bend your elbows. You may not lean back. Nothing changes about your upper body right now. Chest is lifted. Flex your right ankle. Lift the leg up. Lift your chest. Push fingertips into the floor. Lift your chest. Lift your leg a little higher. Take the leg out to the right. Lift your chest. Lift your leg a little higher. Bring the leg back in. Lift it. and put your right leg down. If you felt something borderline like a Charlie horse, perfect, you did it right. So what you were just doing was asking your right quadricep to really tightly contract, and it causes a reflex release on the back side. So here we go. Hands are straight out to the side. Push into the floor for a very straight spine. No leaning back, no cheating. Flex your left foot, raise your left leg. Lift your chest, raise your left leg a little more. Bring the leg out to the left, lift your chest, lift your leg, bring it back in, and put it down. Nice, wiggle the legs a little bit. Whether you need to bend your knees or not, up to you. Tilt your pelvis forward a little bit. Now, lean out again over both legs. Maybe it feels different. You are, as I said earlier, affecting not only the muscles, but the connective tissue. And so the idea is, rather than trying to reach farther forward with our hands or whatever, we want to try and reach farther back with our tailbone and keep the legs active. That's how we're going to feel more in the back of the thighs. Take one more breath here. And slowly coming up from that, give your legs a good wiggle. And just like that, you get to lie down on your back. So roll onto your back, hug your knees in, rock side to side. I want you to keep your right knee hugged in and put your left foot flat on the mat with your left knee bent, right? So we're not extending the left leg yet. Now, here's what I want you to do. Stick your right leg straight up in the air and flex the foot. And please be really mindful of having a straight leg. So important. Grab whatever you can reach. It can be your thigh, your calf, your foot. Make sure you're not bending your right knee. You want your right leg totally straight. Once you get it and it's totally straight, then you're going to start sliding your left leg out onto the ground without letting the right knee bend. Take one more deep breath in. Then you're going to try and pull your right thigh towards your right hip bone. In effect, tilting the pelvis forward without bending the right knee. Now look at what you're doing. You're doing a split, but you're lying down to do it. I'm sure some of your splits look better than mine. But if you're being impeccable with a straight right knee, you should be feeling this at your right sit bone and all the way down your hamstring to your knee. Go ahead and hug the right knee in. Bring your left knee up to meet it. You can rock if you like. And we're going to keep the left knee hugged in and put the right foot flat on the mat with the right knee bent. Remember, we're starting in an easy position because it keeps us honest. So you want to extend your left leg up, flex the ankle. Left leg totally straight. Grab whatever you can grab. Find the correct position with a straight left knee. Then you start sliding your right leg out. You don't let the left knee bend. Then you try and pull the leg towards you enough that your pelvis tips forward. This is just like that standing split, but now we're lying on our back. It's a reclined split. Take another breath, straight left leg. Bend your left knee, hug it in, bring the right knee up to meet it, and rock side to side. So now we're going to use bridge pose as our final front hip opener. So again, there's a lot of different ways that you can emphasize each and every pose. Today, it's all about the front of the hips and the tilt of the pelvis, right? So we're going to get big toes to touch and heels separate, just like we always do. Doesn't matter where your hands are, but you're just going to start with them palms down by the hips for now, because the first thing you're going to do before you lift up is tilt the pelvis back. In other words, there's no curve in your spine. Your pubic bone is going to lead the way as you start to lift. So the idea is that you're pushing through your heels, strongly tilting the pelvis back. In other words, you're poking your pubic bone up and pushing through the heels
Continuing to strongly tilt the pelvis, which means your buns are tight right now, and you should feel it on the front of your hip bones. We are here for 3 more breaths. It's all about that pelvic tilt, you guys. Slowly lower down. Hug your knees into your chest and rock side to side. That's the last of the hard stuff, the difficult stuff. From here, you get to start neutralizing. So we're just going to drop both bent knees to the right. Let the left arm open out to the left and turn the head to the left. Nice, gentle recline twist. Take a couple of breaths. If you are happy here, stay here. If you want a little bit more, your top leg, which in this case is your left leg, you can just cross it over and under the right so that you've got like this twisted, twined up leg position, and it'll be an even deeper twist. That's purely optional, by the way. On your next inhale, bring the legs back up. So if your legs are crossed, you probably want to keep them crossed. We'll draw a couple circles in each direction with the knees in the air. If your legs were not crossed, you can just rock side to side. Do whatever feels good. Just kind of take a moment to pause before we go the other way. And then if your legs were crossed, uncross them, and we start off gentle. So we're just going to drop both bent knees to the left. Right arm opens out to the right with the palm facing up, head turns to the right. And we pause for a couple of breaths and just kind of take it easy to begin with. Purely optional is to take the top leg, the right leg, over and under the left leg. So you've got twisted leg position if you want, just because it deepens the twist. But you may not want to deepen it, so you do what's best for you. And then we bring the legs back up. If your knees are crossed, keep them crossed and draw a couple circles in the air in each direction with your knees. If your knees were not crossed, you could just hug them in and rock side to side. And then uncross your legs if they were crossed and just give them a good squeeze. Now, we're going to come into a traditional proper dead bug. So, your legs are up in the air right now already. Separate the knees and then flex your ankles. Get your legs so that the knees are bent, but your feet are kind of over the knees. And then see if you can grab the inside edges of your feet from the inside. You're trying to get your lower leg vertical and you pull straight down with your hands. But what happens for those of us that are a little bit tighter, our tailbone rolls up. It's a backward tilt of the pelvis, but this is like a forward bend and we want the opposite. So for those of you who are my tribe that are a little bit tighter, your whole goal here, and it won't be visible, is to start to push your tailbone back down into the mat. Like you're trying to tip your pelvis forward rather than back. And even though visually nothing changes, sensation-wise, wowza. It should be quite a difference. You're trying to keep your pelvis really flat while you do all the other good dead bug stuff. Take one more breath. And then you can just hug your knees. Put your feet flat on the mat with your knees bent, ankles and knees together. Let both knees drop to one side on an exhale. Let them come up on an inhale. Let them drop the opposite way on an exhale. Just keep rolling with your breath. We'll go one more time on each side. And then when you're even or equal or ready, let your knees drop open, soles of the feet together. So right now, in this relaxed position, there's a little bit of an arch in the back. Technically, your pelvis is slightly tilted forward, and we're going to enhance that just a wee bit. Just bring your arms overhead, interlace the fingers, and extend your index fingers. Reach through the fingertips, and you're pressing your knees towards the mat. But today, I want you to just feel what's going on in your pelvis. Think about tipping the pelvis farther forward. You're going to feel your buns tighten. It's like you're trying to poke your tailbone down towards the floor. So your pelvis is tilted forward now. Big arch in the low back. Relax, bring your hands down below your shoulders, and now we tilt the pelvis back. So we do this almost every practice to lengthen our low back, but I want you to just think of it purely as a pelvic tilt today. Tilt the pelvis back. You're trying to get your hip bones to move back down towards the earth. You're trying to get your pubic bone to tilt up towards the ceiling. Hold that for a couple of breaths. And then just relax, and just like that, extend your legs. Separate your feet however much you want to. Maybe roll the legs in and out a few times, and then just let them flop. Make sure your spine feels long. Face is soft, hands are below the shoulders, your jaw is relaxed, your eyes are closed. Take a deep breath in. Big exhale through your mouth. Just feel everything settle. So you should be feeling your whole body relaxing. You should be feeling your breath slowing down. And you should be feeling your pelvis really connected to the mat. You've done so much work today with increasing blood flow and oxygen to all of the muscles and connective tissue that attach to your pelvis, that you should be pretty sensitive. In other words, you should be very aware of the sensations around your pelvis. So I want you to feel as though your pelvis is heavy, like an anchor. Your pelvis is keeping you weighed down, as though you're wearing like a weight belt. If you're a scuba diver, you can put weights around your waist to hold you down. So your pelvis is weighted, and yet the rest of you has become weightless. So I want you to imagine that you can feel your legs just floating, your arms, your torso, your head just floating. The back of the pelvis, very connected to the earth, nice and heavy, it is your anchor. And the rest of you simply floating. It should be the same sensation as if you were in water, wearing a weight belt, so that your pelvis keeps you grounded at the bottom of the pool or the bottom of the lake or the ocean, but the rest of you just floats. Should feel very pleasant. Your pelvis is your center of gravity, and it's also what keeps you connected to the earth right now. So just allow the rest of your body the freedom to be weightless and floating, and just notice how that feels.
very, very slowly imagining that ever so slowly and gently, the torso, the arms, the head, the legs all gently begin to float and settle back down, joining the pelvis and connecting to the mat again. And as everything lands, just kind of notice how you feel. Notice if there were any particular emotions or thoughts that came up around all of this work around the pelvis, or even around the relaxation, that floating and being anchored. We hold a lot of rigidity, we hold a lot of stress in our hips. And even when we walk, our pelvis should have movement. There should be a fluidity to it. And hopefully you'll be more mindful of that now. And the emotions come into play with that. So it's always nice just to observe. And so as you're observing, begin to deepen your breath and begin to move your fingers and toes. When you're ready, take the deeper breath and spread the fingers and toes, and exhale with a happy sigh and relax them. Even deeper breath in and just stretch. And exhale. Bend your knees. Roll to your right if that's comfortable for you, and then press yourself up into sitting. And I want you to just notice as you're coming into sitting, if feeling your seat now and finding that alignment perhaps feels a little bit easier because your pelvis is more aligned. It's easier to find that neutral alignment of the pelvis here. See if that's true for you. And if it's not, that's okay. You're still a perfect yogi. We're here to observe and not judge, right? So just notice if your seat feels a little different, and then let your shoulders relax and your head balance on top of your spine. We're going to do a really basic 1-to-2 ratio ujjayi breath here. However, I'm going to ask you to truly try and find your edge. So you can start at whatever length of breath you want, as long as your exhale is twice as long as your inhale. I'm going to encourage you to increase that number with each breath until you hit the point that it feels like your breath is a little stressful, like it's maybe too much challenge. Back it up by 1, and that's your number for today. So maybe you start inhaling 4, exhaling 8, and then inhaling 5, exhaling 10, inhaling 6, exhaling 12. Maybe that feels a little too much, so you back it up to 5, 10. That's your breath. So it's a 1-to-2 ratio breath. This is all through the nose, just an ujjayi breath. But I want you to kind of challenge yourself to find that slightly longer number that is still easy and comfortable to do. Spine is straight and aligned. Deep breath in through the nose. Big exhale through the nose. Off you go at your own count. So go ahead and finish out the breath that you're on. And as you do finish that breath out, just let your breathing return to normal. Just pause for a moment, take stock. How is everything? How's your body, your breath, your mind, your heart, your energy, all of that? How do you feel? And then bring your palms together in front of your heart. Just take a moment in gratitude. We should be very grateful that we are alive right now, right here, at this time, in this place, breathing this breath, knowing what we know. It's very fortunate to be here now. Take one more huge breath in through the nose. Happy, contented sigh. Palms to the forehead, reminding us to be present, to pay attention. Palms together at the lips, reminding us to speak our truth. And palms together at our hearts, reminding us that we are love, that we can always come from a place of kindness and compassion and understanding because we are love. Thank you so much for joining me today. Namaste.